Hello everyone, my name is Xiomaro and welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about Sigma comps. I've talked about how to play Sigma, I've talked about the Wrecking Ball Sigma combo, and I've briefly touched on some other combos, but I haven't taken the time to really dissect every tank duo and how they compare to their more traditional counterparts. As I'm sure many of you are aware if you watch Overwatch League or play enough competitive, the most common comp to play with Sigma right now is double shield with ORISA. Literally the entire meta revolves around double shield at the moment, but it's worth considering that balance changes will inevitably come. So balance aside, let's take a look at each of the Sigma tank pairings and where each pair might be applicable. I'm going to start with the combo that I think has the least synergy, just to get it out of the way. Sigma Winston. Honestly, this isn't a tank pair you should ever be playing. Obviously, in your average platinum competitive match, anything goes really, and it's often best to just have people on their best heroes. So if you end up with a Sigma and Winston one trick, just lean into it. But honestly, they don't really have any synergy. Sigma can't reliably assist Winston on dives, and Winston literally does nothing for Sigma. For that reason, I'm not going to go any further into this comp and how it works because, well, it doesn't work. Next, let's look at a very common pair in solo queue, Sigma Zarya. This is a combo that people have been raving about since the introduction of Sigma, and I've always thought it was nowhere near as good as people think. The positives of the comp are extremely good mid-range poke, and how many types of damage they can deal with. Between Zarya's bubbles, Sigma's shield, and kinetic grasp, they can eat or mitigate almost anything in the game. On top of that, they both have a huge setup ultimate. A big problem this combo faces is how easily bullied they are in close combat. Against a well-played brawly comp, they basically have to give up space to kite heroes like Reinhardt, Reaper, and Mei. You can play Sigma and Zarya into brawly comps, but you end up relying heavily on Graviton Surge and Gravitic Flux to win fights, so you need to be building them fast. The other problem they have is into double shield. They simply don't have the damage to win on shields, and being a mid-range tank duo, they don't really want to push through the shields either, unless you want to get destroyed by Doom, Sim, Reaper, and all these other close-range heroes that are really popular right now. However, double shield probably won't be a thing forever. This combo trades aggressive space creation for huge mid-range damage and massive ult combos. This combo is probably never going to assertively take and make space like REIN, ORISA, or Wrecking Ball can, but what they can win on is mid-range damage and ult combos. For that reason, at least in my opinion, two of the best DPS to pair with these guys is McCree and Hanzo. Both of these heroes have a similar effective range to Sigma and Zarya, and you have two fight-winning ult combos in Grav Dragon and Flux High Noon. It's potentially a decent comp for the future, but they rely heavily on winning ranged poke, and with the amount of shield spam right now, that's just not going to happen. In my opinion, I would say that Sigma Zarya is very similar to running Ana and Zen. You have huge amounts of utility, but it's a very greedy comp with some pretty major weaknesses. Moving on, let's take a look at Sigma D.VA. I think this can be a fairly strong combo, but it's very, very situational. This is kind of like an alternative to Sigma Zarya, and in my opinion, it's not as good in nearly as many situations. If, however, you're playing against Pirate Ship or any kind of spam comp, Sigma and D.VA are actually quite a good bet. Sigma and D.VA together can eat more spam than any other tank duo in the game. If you properly rotate Defense Matrix, Kinetic Grasp, and Sigma's Barrier, you can probably buy your team around 6 seconds of almost complete immunity, even to the spammiest comps in the game. Throw in Immortality and you've got an even longer window of opportunity. That's more than enough time to either reposition for an attack, and once you're ready to engage, you've got 6 seconds, which is ample time to drop on a Bastion, for example, and kill him. And the same thing can apply to other spam comps too. If you're playing into Hanzo and Junkrat, Sigma and D.VA will be able to close the gap and initiate a fight faster than any other tank duo. Where other tanks would have to creep up waiting for cooldowns or for shields to recharge, Sigma and D.VA can let Matrix and Kinetic Grasp do a lot of the heavy lifting while they're closing the gap, and still have the barrier ready once they're actually in the fight. The main weakness of this comp is beam weapons, because both Sigma and D.VA can be pretty susceptible to them. But the plus side is probably the best spam protection in the game. And don't forget you've got the Flux and Bomb combo as well, which is pretty good. Next up, Sigma Hog. Where Sigma D.VA excels at anti-spam, Sigma Hog excels at anti-flank. The threat of both accretion and hook should mean that any would-be flanker will need to think twice or risk getting insta-gipped. One of the benefits of this comp is the low ramp-up time compared to Sigma Zarya, where Zarya has to build up energy before doing optimal damage, and that's actually quite hard with Sigma compared to Reinhardt. Roadhog and Sigma are at peak performance from the get-go. Map depending, I think they could make a decent brawler comp on King of the Hill or something like that. Honestly, it feels kind of like a pub stomper imitation of ORISA Hog. At lower ranks, I think this might actually be an okay comp because people rarely combo Halt Hook there anyway, so having two anti-flank tools could be pretty potent. But at higher ranks where people are less likely to go on solo flanks into these two, ORISA Hog would be a better option for this purpose for their ability to forcibly displace someone in order to land a hook. It's definitely not the worst combo in the world, but I think you're really missing a trick if you're running Roadhog without an ORISA. Now, let's move on to the elephant in the room, ORISA Sigma. Now, let me start by saying that for the last couple of years, the Overwatch meta has been mostly dominated by quote-unquote safe comps. And by that, I mean that pro teams and high-ranked players almost always gravitate towards comps with the fewest counters. Especially when you're on defense, you can't see what the enemy has and then switch. So you need to play a comp that has the least weaknesses possible. In the last year, that has meant stuff like Goats, May Bunker, and now Double Shield. There are ways to play around Double Shield, at least in solo queue, but there's no denying that it is the comp with the fewest weaknesses right now. When played correctly, you can't play ORISA Hog into it because you'll never land a Halt Hook. You can't play Hit Scan into it because you have an ORISA Shield blocking the front and Sigma blocking the off angles and flanks. You can't play Dive into it because Reaper and Doom will either peel you off or kill you, and Reinhardt, well, technically he should be a decent counter to it, can really struggle for a few reasons. First of all, the constant Lucio speed boost nerfs over the years have hurt REIN more than any other main tank, and he's a main tank who does require a lot of resources pumped into him. In particular, he's always worked really well with Ana. And guess what? With all that shield spam, Ana is in a really bad state due to the constant line of sight issues with shields. Plus, getting a good shatter is incredibly difficult against shield spam. So the main synergies of ORISA and Sigma besides the double shield are reasonable shield break and good combos with Halt, for example Halt Accretion and Halt Flux. Even just Halt and Sigma's primary fire is actually really strong for building Sigma's ultimate. But going back to the shields, Sigma's shield allows ORISA to press W for a little bit longer before placing a shield. So that means ORISA can place much more aggressive barriers. And more aggressive barriers means Sigma can more easily get up in people's faces and deal damage while having a shield to retreat back into. When played correctly, it's actually a surprisingly aggressive comp. And when it is played correctly, this is the best tank duo in the game. I'm expecting the answer to this oppressive combo is Halt nerfs and maybe some of Lucio's nerfs being reverted. I know a lot of you guys out there have been playing this comp, but I think we can all agree it's not a lot of fun for anybody involved, so I hope this meta doesn't last too long. Next, let's take a look at the other double shield comp, Reinhardt Sigma. Personally, I think ORISA has a lot more synergies with Sigma, mostly due to Halt. But Reinhardt Sigma can be okay too. In pro or higher ranked games, I think ORISA Sigma is always the superior choice. But at lower ranks, most people aren't playing ORISA Sigma correctly anyway. A lot of people are poking from range and trying to win the shield war like they might have done with ORISA Hog. But really, against most comps, you want to be getting up in people's faces. Well, Reinhardt's whole thing is getting up in people's faces, so at lower ranks, if you're going for the double shield thing, Rein Sigma can be the better option. An aggressive ORISA is still preferable, but if you're playing with a super passive ORISA in a double shield comp, you're better off going ORISA Hog or some kind of Reinhardt comp. To be perfectly honest, I don't think Rein Sigma is a good comp. They don't have a lot of synergies besides both having shields, and I'm sure someone in the comments will mention Sigma's shield and Rein's charge being the same speed, but come on. First of all, that's a bit of a YOLO strat, and secondly, why not just use a Zarya bubble instead? At lower ranks, I think this can be an okay counter to ORISA Sigma, but technically it's not a great comp. So finally, let's take a look at my favorite sleeper OP comp, Wrecking Ball Sigma. If you've seen my videos before, you'll know that I've been a fan of this combo since Sigma first hit the PTR. Although I really like this comp, I'm gonna try not to oversell it. ORISA Sigma is, of course, better in many situations. However, pretty much all of Sigma's synergies with Halt work pretty much the same with Piledriver Accretion, Piledriver Flux, or simply just Piledriver and Sigma's primary fire to build ultimate. On top of that, in the current meta of constant shields, Wrecking Ball can push the enemy to the side of their shields and then slam, which gives your team's snipers or whatever an opportunity to land shots around the shields. I've mentioned the pile driver into flux into mines combo before, and it is a team wiping combo, but honestly just pile driver into flux is often enough to win a team fight without the mines. I would advise comboing flux with a DPS ult instead and then save the mines for another fight. Alternatively, you could use the mines to clean up a fight if they use a defensive ult on the flux. I actually think this is a comp that a lot of people are sleeping on. It is quite map dependent, but I strongly believe that it is a viable comp. The maps it works best on are some of the flatter maps with slightly less high ground to contest. Hanamura Point A, Paris A and B, and Kings Row Streets are some of the places that I've had pretty good success with this combo. Wrecking Ball essentially displaces the front line with boops, clears the high ground areas, for example on Paris Point A, and Sigma guides the team into that space that Wrecking Ball creates. Maps with a lot of high ground to contest like Anubis Point A or Iconworld Castle, personally I think work better with ORISA Sigma or Wrecking Ball D.VA. People say that Wrecking Ball and Sigma want different things, but at least in my experience that's only true on maps like the ones I just mentioned. But aside from that, Wrecking Ball can actually do a lot to enable Sigma and his team. Sigma doesn't want to be spamming shields much, and abilities like Halt and Pile Driver create great combos for him and the rest of the team. Additionally, Wrecking Ball doesn't need an off tank to keep him alive. Before role lock, he was almost always played as a solo tank. And if you've ever watched any pro teams play Wrecking Ball D.VA from the D.VA's perspective, you'll notice that a huge part of D.VA's job in that comp is just guiding the rest of the team through chokes, which Sigma is perfectly capable of doing too. Do I think this comp is going to be the next meta? Probably not. But I think, map depending, it's actually quite a good answer to double shields right now. Especially when you consider that a lot of the stun heroes are out of the meta at the moment. Wrecking Ball, if nothing else, can force the enemy team to swap something. In terms of DPS with this comp, Widowmaker, Hanzo, Ashe, Pharah, Doomfist and Sombra can all work pretty well. Reason being, all of them can make great use of Wrecking Ball's pile drivers, and the fact that Wrecking Ball can push people away from shields so that Hanzo, Ashe and Widow can actually land some shots or a big AoE dynamite. Anyway, that just about does it for Sigma comps. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more gaming guides, news and discussion. And don't forget to check out the links below to Patreon, Discord and Twitch. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.